Expressions have been an integral part of Access development, and they continue to be, and for Office, they're part of things like defining values and calculations, or working with validation rules, and even using selection criteria used in queries. When it comes to application development, expressions are critical for defining data flow and event-driven activities to the macros and code that we can write. To use Access at any level, beyond a very basic one, you need to be able to work with expressions. Well, in the past, it took more than a little bit of knowledge, as well as some skill, to effectively create expressions. But in Access for Office, doing so gets a little easier through the availability of something called IntelliSense. And we're going to get IntelliSense when we use the Expression Builder or the Query Builder. This will help us complete field names and other items, so therefore we're going to reduce errors and not have to spend so much time going back and looking up names for things. It will also save us time and troubleshooting, of course, so let's look at how this might work. I have the contact form open, and I want to create a field at the very top of the form that will tell me how many records I have. That's a very simple expression, but it will allow you to see the IntelliSense and the Expression Builder at work. So I'll start by going up to my gallery and creating a new control. I want to create an unbound text box, so I'll click on the text box tool. Move into the form header, and I'll do a simple click. Here I have my unbound control. Now I'll do a few clicks to see what I need to see. I'll turn off the Add Existing Fields panel and turn on the property sheet. I can see at the top that I have the information for my unbound control, yet it doesn't have a control source. In other words, it's just sitting there. It's not tied to anything. I need to create the expression that's going to tie it to, in this case, a calculation. I'll click in the control source, then move over to the right and click on the Build button. So far, this really isn't anything new. This is the way it's always worked. Likewise, there is the Expression Builder, and other than a little bit of new information at the top, the Expression Builder is very much the same as well. But notice that there is some labeling for expression elements, expression categories, and expression values, so it is a step up, especially from the older versions of Access. As I said, I'll do a simple expression. I want to be able to count something, so I'll start by typing equals, and then the letter C. This will be very familiar if you've ever worked with Visual Basic. It has some IntelliSense built into it, or a lot of other coding types of applications, or if you've used the formulas and functions in Excel. It noticed that I typed equals and then the letter C, and now it's trying to think ahead for me. It's showing me a list of all of the possible options that have to do with something starting with a C. If I'm unfamiliar with this type of work, or I want to expand my knowledge, or I'm not quite sure what parts I have to work with, I can start clicking on any one of these options to see more about them. For example, with captions selected, it tells me that that's a form property. If I come down to the second choice, it tells me that that coerces an expression to a Boolean. Okay, that may not mean anything to me, so I'll continue to type. I typed the C. Now I'm going to do an O. Still not enough, so I'll do a U. And finally, I'm seeing a very limited list, but I'm also seeing two different count options, and this again is where this little tooltip will help me. There is a count that's a form property, and the second one is a count that calculates the number of records returned by a query. I could choose either of these, but what I'll actually do is continue to type. Not because I have to, but because I want to show you that you do not have to use IntelliSense. For a lot of people who know what they want, typing is faster, but having to look at a list can slow them down. So in this case, I'll say I know what I want to type, and I'll type the word count. I also know that the next thing I have to do is type an opening parenthesis, so I'll do that. Now you can see it says, okay, you obviously don't need IntelliSense, but I'll give you a tooltip that tells you how to complete what you started. In this case, it's telling me that in order to do the count function, I have to put in some type of expression. Alright, so what do I want to count? I want to count the values that are found in the ID field. But if you remember, back when we started this chapter, we renamed that field to Student ID, even though the label still says ID. So, I do have to type the right thing. I could come down to the bottom of the screen, and from the left-hand column I could start drilling down and find the name of the field if I wanted to. But I think I know what it is, so the faster way is to just start typing. Once again, if I start typing an S, I see a fairly lengthy list. If I go to ST, I have a state and province field. There are also other functions I can use. If I get down to STU, then I only have one choice. This actually is the student ID field. I'll double-click that. So even though this is not a very complicated expression, I was able to use IntelliSense, or at least get some help filling it out, without having to remember every detail about what's available in my database. I'll type the closing parenthesis to close this. And if you need help, you can use the bottom of the screen, just like we could in prior versions of Access, to use the expression builder. I'll say OK. And just to prove to you that it works, I'll move over to the left side of the ribbon. When I go into my regular view, I see that I have 4 records, and if I move to the bottom of the form, I can see that that does match, so my calculation, based on my expression, works just fine. If you need help or want to know more about how to write actual expressions for different uses, you should refer to our full Access for Office course. That will provide all of that information for you. Access 2007, though, offered a huge leap forward in what the application had to offer and how it was presented to those who used it. In other words, the interface changed, as well as some functionality changes. Some big changes happened when it came to the design of forms and reports. I'll admit that I didn't expect too many enhancements when it came to for Office. They usually make huge changes in one application in one version, and then continue that many big changes in the next. But after so much work on 2007, and now taking a look at for Office, I'm happy to say that there have been many significant enhancements in for Office. Some of them might seem initially insignificant. It's just a different way of looking at it, for example. Often they don't jump out at you at first glance, but once you start working with it, you'll see that they are intended to save us a lot of time formatting and automating in our databases. So whether you're creating databases for personal use, for use by your team or your coworkers, or even for distribution to broader audiences, the tools that we've seen here are going to assist us in doing so. And again, as I say so many times, it will allow us to do so with consistency, accuracy, efficiency, and, as far as Access goes, with a new level of polished professionalism.